All right, guys. So welcome to the Customer Discovercast. This is our first video audio podcast recording. I'm sitting here with James. He is the founder of Matchmaker FM, which I am a huge fan of. This is not a paid advertisement, by the way. I found out, I think, through a YouTube video that was showing me how to set up my podcast and everything very informatively. The production quality was very up there. And then all of a sudden I saw something about Matchmaker, and it was a free service where I could find guests for my show. So James, thank you for joining.
Thanks, Ethan. Great intro. And, it's a pleasure to hear that you're getting so much from the platform already. And obviously, you mentioned just before it's still kind of early on in your podcasting journey. Good to hear that you're already getting results.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, I really want to know a lot more about you, why you started Matchmaker a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you've obviously been, whether it's in the podcast industry or the media making industry for a while. Tell me about that.
Okay. Yeah. I'll start at the beginning, shall I? So when I was, when I was a kid, I was just finishing high school, like 17 years old. I wanted to go into radio as a DJ. I still love playing music, but like that was what I wanted to do for my career. And whilst I was doing that, I was also like learning how to build websites, and I was kind of interested. This was like back in 2004, 2005. The internet was still really young. And I
So a
just saw this
developer too.
opportunity. Yeah. So I was building websites to begin with. I was more like a designer, I guess. And then I kind of learned to code a little bit. I haven't written code for many years now, but I learned a bit of everything in the early days, so that kind of set me up with like a really good foundation to really start like an internet company. And so I decided to go off, instead of going to radio, I went off to university and I studied, my degree was in interactive multimedia, which is kind of a fancy term for web design, if you like, so I learned how to code, I built websites, create databases, all these kind of things that you need to, I suppose, work in the tech industry. But then when I was at uni, I sort of started this business called wave streaming, which was like streaming media services for radio stations, because I was like, well, I like radio and I kind of understand a little bit about the internet now. So I'm going to just put the two together, and did that for many years. Still have a business called radio.co, which is a broadcasting platform for the radio industry. Does very well. So more recently, we've kind of got involved with podcasting. So I have a business called podcast.co, and that's really a full service podcasting agency. So we actually create podcasts for customers. We also have a hosting platform which pushes them out to the likes of Spotify and iTunes, etc. And also more recently, we decided to kind of go into, we created a platform called Matchmaker, which you've just mentioned. And Matchmaker really just sprung out of us like looking at funnels of ways to get customers onto podcast.co. We set up 2 different pages on podcast.co. This was like last year. So we had a landing page saying like, if you want guests for your show, please fill out this form. We just had like a Google form on there. And then we had another page which said, if you want to be on shows, if you want to be booked on podcasts as a guest because you're promoting your business or you're launching a book or whatever it might be, you want to share your experiences, your stories, fill out this form. So we had these 2 Google forms. People started filling them out, but we actually had no way of collecting these 2 groups of people together, because we just saw this as like a way to market to people. It's just effectively a funnel. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we actually had a platform that could connect these 2 groups of people together? So we decided to come up with a concept, like a wireframe with our designer. So we sat down and we kind of sketched out how it might look, if you like. Put it to sort of bed for a little while because we were focusing on the podcasting side of things. And then probably the end, about this time last year, we thought, okay, let's build this thing. So we launched it as a kind of what you call an MVP, minimum viable product, in February. And obviously we already had these 2 lists of people who would make good users for Matchmaker. So we kind of said, look, we create this product, go and check it out. It's free to sign up. And yeah, the rest is history. We've grown incredibly quickly this year. We launched, to say, February, March time. We've just hit 15,000 users on Matchmaker.
15,000, you said?
Yeah, 15,000.
Wow. And your early stage MVP was a Google form.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. So, it's a case of just validating that there's a demand for a product or this is like a market within a market, because
Hmm.
we were already in podcasting. So it's like, okay, what do people in podcasting do? Well, like I think it's 60 or 70% of podcasts are based on interviews and having guests on. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a section of a sector of a market within a wider scope. So, focusing down on being super niche. Um, and the good thing about Matchmaker was we launched it as a free platform. We've only recently started monetizing it, but that was as a way to grow and also to kind of validate that yes, people were using this, and yes, there was value there for kind of our customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, remember our podcast, and this podcast is created on behalf of my business.
Yeah.
We're aimed at helping founders build products that people love, and basically that comes, the stage before you ever sell. It's about interviewing people and validating your idea, and then iterating based on the feedback. So,
Mm.
I mean, it's incredible the way that you went about that, because that's really what I want to focus on. Like,
Okay.
how you went through with the Google form, that was an MVP, but how did you really validate the idea? You already had an existing audience.
Mm.
And before we move on to kind of the biggest roadblocks, tell us about kind of the successes that you found with your customer discovery process.
Well, I think to begin with, the main success was we created these two landing pages, and yes, they were Google Forms. Um, as I say, the benefit for us there is there's like very little, like no, basically, it didn't cost us anything to do that. We just spent a bit of time writing some copy. Fortunately, these two pages ranked pretty well on the search engines because we already had some domain authority on podcast.co because we had lots of content about podcasting. So we put up these two pages, keyword targeted towards like, I want to find guests for my show. And that's really where we're getting a lot of the traffic from. Um, but, rather than just saying like, please give us your name and email, we were like, please tell us your name, your email, what sort of guests are you looking for? So we had like, I think it was about 5 or
Segments.
6 different fields
Yeah.
to make sure that actually these people were really passionate and genuine about what they wanted. It wasn't just a kind of case of, oh, give us your name and email and we'll send you a PDF, because that person kind of could be anyone. And it weren't necessarily going to validate that they were really a good fit for what we were looking for. So yeah, it was kind of surprising for us, I think, to see that people are actually going to this extent. I suppose the main roadblock we then had was, okay, well, how do we actually create something to join these two groups of people together?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. When it takes, okay, so you did your customer discovery interviews. Your early stage low fidelity MVP was a Google form, which is amazing,
Yeah.
by the way, because you got it out to tons of people and you validated the idea beautifully.
Mm.
How did you go about developing this platform? Did you go, a no code builder like Bubble.io, which is very feasible, or did you hire a team of developers? Did you crank out the new, the old software development, web development skills? What'd you do?
So we were in a position where we have a development team in house. Um, we actually set a couple of junior developers the task of creating like our kind of proper MVP. When we took the product to market. These no code platforms, like, I'm kind of old school in the way that I've been doing this for 15 years now. I really don't know much about these no code platforms. So as an entrepreneur, when I try and build a product, I'm very much just like, okay, we need to actually build it and create it with code and databases. So that's kind of like my approach, which probably actually isn't the optimal way of doing it these days. But yeah, so we kind of, rather than sort of taking the sort of momentum away from our core platform, we had a developer who had just joined us, and he had been working on our main website. So he was really just working on like the marketing site for podcast.co, which is great, but it's, for someone who's a young developer and they're just starting a career, it's not hugely challenging. So we thought, okay, well, let's set this guy this challenge of creating this MVP. So he was a guy called Rowan, fantastic guy, and he's really kind of like leading this almost like this project now for us. But he was the first one who we kind of said, right, let's try and create something. Before we kind of started writing code, we sat down with our designer, which I think again is quite important. And we actually thought about the process, the onboarding for the customers, how people would, if you're a podcaster and you want to find guests, how are you going to do that? Likewise, if you're a guest and you want to be in podcasters, how can you kind of interact with podcasts? So we kind of planned, we mapped that all out. Initially just by kind of creating some wireframes. And we decided, okay, effectively you need like almost like a social network driven type site. So you have a profile, you have a picture of yourself, you have like a tagline. So again, it was just thinking to us, it was just a creative process. It's just like looking at like, right, we've got all this data on who our customers might be through these Google forms, how this data is going to actually fit into the actual platform. We're trying to map it out in terms of, well, we've asked sort of people what sort of podcasts they want to be on. What's a way of categorizing them? Well, we looked at, okay, obviously podcasts are based on categories within iTunes or Apple Podcasts. So those should be our categories, because if my podcast's about business, I want to find people on business. It's an easy way of saying, right, like that's how we can match those two groups of people together. So yeah, that was, rather than just sort of giving people too much like, if you can just type down whatever you're interested in, which is great, but you need a way of systemizing that between people and actually creating a database to kind of connect those two groups of people together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I was looking at I come from a business background and more recently product management. So I always love to break down products and see like, what is the hierarchy of engagement within this product? If you're familiar with that, Sarah Tavel's 3-step process. And I was wondering, like, what if you guys had, a feed that would essentially like show, okay, this match was made, a month ago or a week ago, and here's how it went. They just recorded this episode. Here's what they spoke about.
Yeah.
What if there was something like that where people could really see the tangible progress on a feed and, connect there too? That would be really cool. But not
Yeah.
saying
I
that,
mean, this is,
yeah.
It's interesting because you've mentioned this. This is kind of one of the things that's on our roadmap now. Like, again, it was perhaps not obvious when we built it. Because again, when you create and launch a product, and especially once you start getting users and this many users using it, you learn lots very quickly. Like, you think, okay, well, we didn't think about that when we were building it. It's kind of, sometimes it's impossible to cover every angle. And we were just thinking, right, initially it was, how do we make connections? We weren't actually thinking, oh, do we need to be tracking these connections? We were not. So of course now we're thinking, right, as you say, we need to a way of quantifying the connections we're making, and again, allowing people to sort of tell more of a story. So, like today, obviously, I'm speaking to you, Ethan. In future, sort of further down the line, once we've built this functionality, it would be good to say, like, here's James and Ethan's conversation that they've had because of a result of this platform. So we've still got lots and lots of work to do in that area. But again, it's got to always, I think when you launch a software platform, a software as a service business, you've got to always be evolving. And certainly the first year or two are very, very crucial, because you've got to make sure that you're kind of keeping up and innovating and building those features that your users want.
Absolutely. And that's kind of my next topic that I want to ask you about. What has been the biggest roadblock and how have you overcome it? You're in the marketplace business, and a lot of people say that's really tough because you have to build one side before the other solution in demand. So tell me about that.
I'd say, yeah, that was the biggest roadblock. It was like the intimidation to begin with, because no one wants to sign up to a platform whether it's a ghost town. Podcasters don't want to join, and if there's not that many guests, or if the guests aren't really great quality, and likewise guests want to be on somewhere that there's engaged podcasts. So I think having those two lists of targets or prospects, if you like, to begin with, were good, because we knew that they would be our sort of like beta users. They would be our really early adopters. So we kind of actually, to begin with, we actually started using that data to actually like import people's profiles just to save time. So we'd literally almost like create an account for them, say like, here we go, you can already log in and use it. The other decision we made was to have it as a closed ecosystem. And again, we're changing this in future, because I think we're at a level now where we're ready to take things to the next level. But at the moment, to see who's on Matchmaker, either as a podcaster or as a guest, you have to log in. You have to sign up, create an account, log in, which has been great, because obviously, it means that people don't. In the early days, people couldn't see how many people were there or not there, which was great. But now, of course, we're kind of limiting it, because it makes it harder for people to share their profiles. So, for example, if you want to say, well, hi, I'm Ethan, I'm a matchmaker, you can book me here. It's not really very shareable on social media. So we're kind of we're now opening those gates up to make everything a bit more browsable via the sort of public internet, and also make all the profiles more crawlable through search engines.
Absolutely. Yeah. You guys
But
do a really good job of giving you just enough information to where it's not overwhelming about a guest, but you know their gist and you
yeah,
have their social links. And I like the
yeah,
links, kind of the badges actually, like the founding team member, the badges.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like, once a certain amount of matches occur on your platform, maybe they could get like some kind of credential, almost like a prestige system, like,
yeah,
pro member, they've done, over 50, matchmakers. That would be pretty cool
yeah.
too. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And
Talk
and
about
and
that a little
again,
bit.
like reviews and things like that. So it's just about kind of, I suppose the word is like gamification. It's basically saying, yeah, you get rewarded, or you get like a certain level when you've done so many interviews, or you get like another badge for it. So this is all stuff that we've talked about, and it's like, again, I think it's stuff that we're going to be implementing, over the next year. This year has really just been about validating the idea of the platform, and also just getting to a point where we've got that momentum. We're getting people using it and signing up every single day.
Absolutely. And you have a lot of people that are active on that. I mean, I was really impressed by, the responses I got from, I mean, you have like Fortune 500 CEOs on there and they're like, okay,
I
yeah,
know.
and that, book my time on Calendly and we'll set it up.
And do you know what,
So I go,
the other thing, Ethan, to mention as well, is we've been selective about who we've outreached to, because we've had this closed ecosystem so people can sign up. So how have we marketed it? Well, we've spent a lot of time doing outreach, like on platforms like LinkedIn, and making sure that the types of guests and the types of podcasts that we're outreaching to are going to be good fits for the platform. And I think cultivating that kind of high quality user base has been another kind of something we had to overcome. But that's been part of the benefit of it. We've focused on quality over quantity, but certainly initially anyway.
absolutely. So, I really want to kind of shift gears a little bit and take your expertise. You have a lot of experience in this industry.
Yeah.
Um, and as well as transfer that into like, you're talking to founders right now. You can be in a place of mentorship. What would you recommend for an early stage founder who has an idea and, maybe they're building out their early stage MVP and they want to get their first
Mm.
10 users, paid or not, they just want to get users so that they can conduct user research and validation efforts. What would you recommend?
If you've not got any audience, just doing outreach. Just literally email people, send them messages on LinkedIn, follow them on Twitter. Send them an at response on Twitter. Just be personal, and trying to, and remember as well, like, people sometimes are quite happy to give up their time for free and give an opinion on a product. If you can structure it in a way where you can explain the benefit to them. This is what we were really careful on when we were doing outreach for Matchmaker. Is we were sort of saying to potential guests, here's why we think you should sign up. But what are you going to get from this? It's because you're going to get booked on podcasts and grow your personal brand. And podcasters are looking for people like you to interview. So it's about just being clever about how you craft that initial message when you're doing your outreach, rather than just saying, hey, sign up to my platform, it's wonderful, it's going to change your life. Like, think about the value that your product or service can deliver. And even if you haven't got it yet, like, this is the thing, we were kind of, when we had our very very early stage of MVP of 2 Google Forms, we kind of, in a sense, we were sort of like twisting the truth, because we were sort of saying, sign up and we have this product, which we didn't even have at the time. We actually had no ways of, but we had to kind of market it in such a way where the promise was real. And then obviously we eventually delivered on the promise, but it was a case of you've got to make sure that your messaging is right, I think.
Yeah, there's a name for that. It's called, I forgot whether it's like the magic door MVP or something like
Yeah.
that. Like you have a landing page like, hey, sign up for this platform,
It
early,
doesn't exist yet, but it's
it
going to
does.
be great.
Yeah,
This
we're
is it.
if you show your interest, it will exist. That's kind of the
Yeah,
point that you were making. So that's awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So good stuff. I mean, do you have any questions for me?
What's a good? I mean, I suppose as a someone who's just signed up to Matchmaker, um, what do you think of the platform? I mean, it's interesting, some of the points you've already made. I think we're aware of, in terms of like how the product can be improved.
Sure.
But also, what advice would you give to people who are looking to get using podcasting? Like, why did you decide to start a podcast?
Sure. So, two-part answer. I'll
Yeah,
give you the pros and cons of the platform, and then well, I'll start off with why I decided, and then I'll give you the pros and cons of the platform.
yeah.
Uh, don't worry. Good news, by the way, is I'm not going to be, what is it? The Gordon Ramsay of podcast platforms. I decided to start a podcast. One, I used to have one when I was in the fitness industry, and I loved it. The people that it connected me to were some of my,
Mm,
idols in the industry, and it was really amazing. And I talked to, a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And I realized that, podcasting is huge. Everybody wants to talk about what they're doing. Everyone has a story
mm,
to tell. And so do I, and I'm excited to hear other people's story. It's always interesting, especially people like yourself. I love talking to people who have ideas that they then turn into careers almost, right? You turn it into a
mm,
service that adds value to a certain target demographic. And as a result, you can create a career doing something that you love. And this kind of is user research for me as well. Our target demographic, we help founders build products that people love. So it's exciting to talk to about your customer discovery efforts and how you went about that, and how we can basically fit ourselves into that process eventually.
mm.
So I found out about Matchmaker. I wasn't really looking for anything like this. I was just listening to one episode about, I forgot what it was. Like, I think it was about streaming software like this. I was going to use StreamYard or Squadcast or something like that. And at the end of that
Sure.
episode on YouTube, they said, "Oh, by the way, if you're looking for guests to interview on StreamYard or Squadcast, check out Matchmaker." So I went straight to it. I was like, "There's no way this is free," and it was. So now
Mm,
that brings me to kind of the assessment of the platform. The pros, it's beautifully designed, and I'm very
mm.
design sensitive in the sense where I love products that are well designed, not just from like a parent standpoint, but from the experience that you have. So the UI UX design of the site is beautiful. uh, I would say, that's definitely a pro. The trust and authority that you guys kind of give off as soon as you join the platform is up there. You can tell that it's not just a platform like, hey, join, here's a database of guests. Like, you guys really curate the platform to make sure it's top talent.
Mm,
I would say cons, I would just say, maybe a little bit more of like like you said, like prestige system. You guys are working on that. And that's
yeah.
not the most feasible thing to start out with. So it makes sense. But having kind of like a prestige system where you can say, like, all right, this person has done, you know, 10 interviews and they've showed up at a 90% consistency rate. Or,
Yeah.
like just I would say something like that, maybe to fuel the engagement, because that'll help you grow. Because then who's to say that they can't then, automatically share it to Twitter, automatically share it to LinkedIn. And
Mm,
now their newsfeed knows about the platform because you have that badge there, although they're kind of bragging about themselves, right?
yeah.
And then they automatically join from there, and you tap into people's audience, kind of like what you
Yeah.
do with podcasts, right?
Yeah.
So
And
I would
I think
say
that's how TikTok have grown, isn't it? Because like a lot of people will share their TikTok videos on other platforms, and of course, it's got the TikTok logo in the corner, you know.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could build in your social proof or your growth into other people's bragging rights.
Mm. Yeah,
And
that's
I
it.
mean, you should, because you're giving people a platform to grow. Like, connecting with other people's audience is the best way to grow your personal brand. I believe you said that earlier, and I
Mm.
completely agree.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, thanks very much. That's great. Great feedback. Really interesting. I'm kind of curious to hear what you're working on anyway, because like, so you mentioned that you're using podcasting as a way to kind of learn from other people, which I think is really interesting, and kind of like
Absolutely.
use that as a way to shape how you're building your business,
Yeah,
which I think
absolutely.
it's great. So it's not just a way of like gaining exposure. Obviously, that's another benefit you're getting from it, but it's actually like speaking to potential customers, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. The core reason is because I believe we can't talk to enough of our target demographic, right? We have a UI UX design team, we have a dev team,
Mm,
and we've talked to over 100 people. We spent thousands of dollars to make sure that we have highly curated, highly targeted founders that, would eventually be our target demographic. And we've asked them very systemized questions to make sure that we can turn that into data insights, to make sure
yeah.
every design that we do when we're creating wireframes and prototypes, which we are doing right now, we know that each feature is validated. So we know which one is highly sought after, which one's going to probably have the most amount of assumed usability, And we
Mm.
continue to do that. Every iteration we create, whether it's switching from wireframes to mockups, we're going to interview our Slack community, which all the founders are there.
Mm.
Excuse me. And we're basically going to build in public. So as we build, we're going to collect feedback and then iterate that to where when we do officially launch in 2021, we're going to be taking pre-orders before that. We will basically have all of this validated feedback to where we know that what we built is with that end consumer in mind. And as a result, we'll have no problem launching digital marketing campaigns behind that because we know it's something that people want.
I think that's a really good way of approaching it as well. And again, like I remember what I was going to say now, like because when we were working on the initial MVP of Matchmaker, it's funny because you can't always create everything you want to. So you have like this big long list of wants, but then ultimately sometimes it's down to resource or just down to time or just down to just getting a damn thing out. You know what I mean? Like, so you're not spending a year building a product, but actually spending like 3 months building something and then learning from it. So I think that's, again, it's quite an important thing to do, is sometimes actually just get the thing out, get people using it, and then sort of be reactive to what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah. Steve Blank calls it getting out of the building, because we can have a
Yeah,
lot of assumptions within our organization, but until we get out and we talk to people, which is hard during coronavirus, but actually it's
yeah,
not because everyone's so accessible via podcasts and, via these
yeah.
platforms. Yeah.
Well, again, I think that's probably been like one of the good things about this year for us, in terms of, like, obviously it's not a good thing, but it's certainly meant that more people are looking for other ways to network and meet people, isn't it? So, I think that's, again, probably been one of the reasons why we've done pretty well this year.
Absolutely. I was going to say, in your position perfectly with that. I wouldn't, even people who work a normal day job that aren't entrepreneurs, I don't see why they wouldn't have, a personal brand, growing their podcast, talking about product
Yeah,
management, talking about software development. You see it a lot more too. So that's, I
yeah.
mean, props to you. You're doing a great thing. And I can't wait. You have my business. I'm here and I can't wait to watch the platform develop. I'll be on it. Yeah.
Awesome,
So
Ethan. Thanks very much.
yeah, James, thank you so much for joining us. And, it's been great talking to you. Can you tell the people how to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you can visit us over at matchmaker.fm if you're looking to be a guest on shows, or if you're looking for interesting people to speak to on your own show. All of my social links are on jamesm.com/connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ethan.